Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of the podcast. I have a very special guest. I have Raegan Padgett, who is a former soccer player at Baylor University and is actually starting PT school very soon. I want to get Raegan on the show just to get a kind of unique perspective because she is about to start PT school. And I just want to ask her questions about what the application process was like, discuss maybe possible fears and concerns that many other students may have. And welcome to the show, Raegan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Cool. And as I like doing, we just kind of like to jump right into things. And Raegan, do you mind just kind of introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about your schooling background and where you're going to PT school?
Yeah. So I attended Baylor University. I graduated in 2020, so this past spring. I majored in health science studies on the pre-physical therapy track, and I will be staying at Baylor University for my PT program.
Cool. That makes it very easy since you're obviously familiar with the campus and everything.
Yes.
And what made you decide to pursue PT as a career?
So, the start of my PT journey was pretty similar to a lot of people's. I had to attend a physical therapy session for my sport. So that's kind of how I got introduced to it. But I really had to, over my 4 years playing soccer, I had to see a lot of teammates go through really intense physical therapy sessions, ACLs, labrum tears, all these really big injuries. And I had some small injuries of my own. And I really got an up close look at especially the sports medicine side of physical therapy. And it was just really intriguing to me to see physical therapists be a part of the entire recovery process, starting from before pre-op and then going all the way into whenever they're released. So that was just such a big factor that drew me to physical therapy. It wasn't just writing a prescription or seeing them for the surgery. It was being a part of the full process and seeing them from the hardest parts to the best parts when they get released. So it was just seemed so cool to me and so genuine, and the relationships they made. I'm still friends with a lot of the physical therapists I had to see. So that was just an awesome part of me. It just seemed so relationship oriented and a profession that really I thought fit me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think your journey is kind of very similar to mine just because I
Mhm.
tore my ACL playing basketball and I knew nothing
Wow.
about the field. I never went through it
Yeah.
myself. I had minor ankle sprains and stuff in playing basketball, but nothing that ever required physical therapy. And then when you tear your ACL, you obviously have to do that.
Yeah.
And for some of you guys that may have listened to previous episodes, Raegan is actually really, really good friends and actually roommates with Kylie, who went through the whole ACL process. And I'm sure that, as a teammate, as a friend, you saw her go through the ups and downs, and she shared her journeys about kind of the struggles that she had and some of the complications that she had. And I'm sure that, Kylie attributes a lot of her success of getting back on the field again to physical therapy. And I'm sure
Mhm.
that probably played a role into your decision as well. And it really is a cool
Definitely.
field. It's funny because I actually just yesterday I posted, someone sent me a DM about they see 20 to 30 patients a day in an outpatient setting.
I
And
saw that.
obviously
Yeah.
that's crazy because that'll push people away from outpatient because at least that's for me, that's what I like to do. I like to work with athletes. That's why I got into the field in the first place.
Mhm.
But at my last job, I was seeing 12, 13, 14 patients a day. And then after you think you can do it for a while. And then over time, it kind of
Mhm.
just adds on and adds on. You're kind of
Yeah.
I can't do this for much longer. But I'm hopeful for changes to come, hopefully. And obviously, you're still at least 2 years away from treating patients
Mhm.
and everything like that. But hopefully, when you get there, you'll kind of want to be, at least as far as what we try to do, part of the change for what physical therapy should look like, what we think it should look like.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting field because you can kind of make of it what you want to, and you're obviously still very, very new in the process, but it's a cool field because you do have different avenues. Some people want to go to the sports realm, some people want to go acute care, hospital, and things like that.
Mhm.
Some people want to do travel. There's so many. There's essentially there's endless possibilities in kind of the
Yeah.
world of PT, which is kind of cool. And what I also did get a chance to ask on my Instagram, people if there are questions that people wanted to ask you, and a common question that people wanted to ask you is how did you balance school, sports, and the application process? Because
Mhm.
obviously, being an athlete is takes up a lot of your time.
Yeah. Well, honestly, didn't always balance it too well. it's hard whenever you're in it, like you always think you're prepared and you can always go on with the plan, but until you're in it, it's just, you just don't know what you're gonna encounter really. But how I tried to balance it was prioritizing like things in my life. So I knew I already committed to being an athlete, so, and being a student. So I'd block out like my times for classes, my times for practice. I I'm big in planning, and I've always had like a planner and agenda. But while being a college athlete, I've like really um, I was very detail oriented. I would even block out like hours. Like I'm studying from this hour to this hour. I practice from this hour to this hour. I'm eating dinner from like this time to this time. So, which isn't for everyone, but that's how I was able to really like maximize my productivity and even like have a life still, like be able to be very productive during certain times and then be able to have like time for myself, so you don't get, because if you just go, you're going to get burnout, and you really got to prioritize making time for yourself as well. But definitely what I would say helped for me was doing like day-to-day priorities or like week priorities and trying to at least get those done, and that really helped me stay on track and kind of be like the best like athlete and student that I could be during those 4 years. So, but yeah, it wasn't always perfect. Definitely got off track multiple times. But like it's messy, and it kind of, you kind of have to take it as it comes. But yeah, just trying to stay organized and being really time conscious was big for me.
That'll 100% help you when you get to actual PT school,
Yeah.
just because there's no, people can't really prepare you for the volume of information that you're about to receive in PT school. People can tell
Yeah.
you, but it's a lot. And I think that's what I struggled with my first year, was just like I always felt like I had to study 7 days a week. I had to study, but like
Yeah.
your brain and your body have to shut down and do something different. And I think that you learned that as far as time management and being structured earlier in undergrad. And I think honestly that will help you tremendously when you get to PT school. So that's definitely a positive thing. And a lot of people also wanted to ask you like what the application process was like, and also how many schools did you apply to?
Okay, yeah. So I applied to 7 or 8 schools. I think it was 8 schools. And I knew people who applied to a lot more or a lot less, but I just factored in like, how the cost of it all, like the times I had. And I picked programs that I thought like I would suit well, or it would suit me well. And so, yeah, 7, 8 schools for me, but the application process was kind of crazy. I applied in the summer going into my senior year, and I was also taking summer classes. I was still a student athlete. So it was a crazy, crazy summer. And I was studying for the GRE. I still hadn't taken that yet. So it was a crazy process. But again, I just tried to be very detail oriented and tried to plan like my days really well, because I was having to not only apply but study. And that's the thing with a lot of people. A lot of people applying don't have the luxury of just applying. They have jobs, they sometimes have families. I had my sport and classes. So just being very good with time management helped me out a lot, because I feel like at times I really could have, like, I could have gotten really like worrisome or like had a lot of anxiety. But I just tried to focus on like those priorities that I had and like what I needed to get done for that day. And that really helped me kind of like keep my like head level and not get too like in my head about it. So yeah, I mean it's tough. I think even if you're just applying, it's still tough, because
Yeah.
those questions aren't easy to answer on applications, and it is like costly. So there's a lot of factors in that, but I feel like as long as you go in with a plan on like how you want to get things done, and also leaning on your friends or classmates who have already gone through the process and really asking those hard questions, like how they did it best or like what they did wrong, really helped me as well, because at least you have an idea of like, okay, like this is the better way to do it, or these are some things that they said not to do. So that's helpful as well.
Yeah, I think that for people, a lot of people always ask student like pre-PT students will always ask like, how many schools do I apply to? And I was like, no, I don't think anyone can really answer that for you.
Yeah.
But I feel like you kind of settled in on a good median of like 8 to 10 schools. Kind of gives you a lot of opportunities, but also like I've had some friends who applied to like 3 schools, and I was like, how'd you guys do that? Like I would have
Yeah.
so much anxiety.
Me too.
Um, not a lot of people know this. It's not something I share too often, but I actually applied to 17 schools.
Wow.
But
Good for
I had
you.
there was a thought process behind it, because so for me it was a career change, and I was like,
Okay.
I'm giving up this salary to, and also I had to take 2 years of prerequisites at a community college, so that was like
Mhm.
essentially 2 years of like wasted time, and then plus 2.5, 3 years of PT school. That's 5 years of not making any
Yeah,
money. So I was like, if I'm going to shoot my shot, I want to give myself as many chances as possible. So I went down
understandable.
the list. Yeah. And I went down the
Mhm.
list and I just looked at, kind of did the same thing as you. I looked at where my GPA, my GRE score fell in. And I was just like, I don't care where I am. I just want to go to PT school and not waste a year of my life. Just because
Exactly.
if I applied to 6 and I didn't get into anywhere, then I just wasted a whole year and I got to, sit there waiting until the next cycle to
Yeah.
apply. So I just took my shot, and thankfully I got in somewhere, and that was my
Yeah.
mentality. Just get in
Yeah.
somewhere.
No, same. That's completely understandable.
Yeah.
It's so competitive out there that I mean, just the thought of like not getting in that first year and having to do it all over again is daunting.
Yes.
It's a big
Yes.
task.
Definitely. And this is kind of a off record, because I know I sent you the questions ahead of time, but what kind of things were you looking for when you're looking for a PT school?
So my kind of top priority was location. I really wanted to stay in the state of Texas. I'm a big like homebody. I love being with my family. So that was like really hard. Just like I did apply to out of state schools, but only two, I think, because being like out of state was like a big thing for me. I was like, I don't plan on like, I just didn't plan on like for years staying out of the state. But thankfully I did get in. I got into Baylor, which is in state. So that was my top priority. But um, my next priority was just that it was like the values were there. I really looked at like the mission of the program and like the values, because I really think that is a big deal. I've had a lot of friends talk to me about how like the program just wasn't what they thought, and like the professors just like weren't the people they really like thought they would be. And so that was like kind of something in the back of my mind I was thinking about. And whenever I got to go on interviews, like, and they allowed us to ask questions, I tried to use that time wisely. So those were two things that I was kind of thinking about when applying.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think those are all really, really good things to keep in mind. Because at the end of the day, it's not just whether or not the school is a good fit for you, it's also whether or not
Mhm.
you're a good fit for the school.
Exactly.
And every school's got different philosophies. And I think it's really cool that you kind of, you're looking for the right fit. And thankfully, it is your kind of hometown school where you
Mhm.
grew up playing for 4 years. So it's
Exactly.
probably a really cool thing to kind of be like, I get to stay here and be at
Yeah.
home. It's funny because I didn't do any of that. I literally told you I went down the list. I just like took my shots, and I did think, for me personally, and I'm guessing a lot of other PT students will think about this too, is the cost of the school.
Yes.
Like there are some schools that I looked at that were like 130 and $140,000 for 3 years, and I was like, how am I ever going to pay this off?
Gonna pay that off.
Yeah, and I think from, if I remember correctly, a lot of schools kind of fall into like that 90,000 to 100,000 bracket, which is still obviously very expensive, but like you're still saving potentially 40 some $1,000s, given the price. And there was one school in particular in my state of Maryland that was, if I remember correctly, 35,000 for all 3 years combined. And I was
Wow.
like, I want to go
I'm
there.
going there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was so upset when I didn't get in, because and my grades actually met everything that they required. Also,
Okay.
I took microbiology specifically to go to that school because they were the only school to require microbiology that I was applying to. So I literally took this class, and I had friends in the program who were talking to some of the professors that were in there, and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And it's just tough because I think, unfortunately, finances do play a role into people's decision
They
making.
definitely do.
Like I had some of my coworkers from my last job, they were like, I'm going to be paying off my loans until I'm, 45, 50 years old. And I was like, that's insane. So it's just, there's so many factors to think about when, if there's any PT students listening to this that you need to take into consideration when you're applying. Raegan kind of looked
Definitely.
at the school philosophies and making sure that it was a good fit. But I also think on the flip side, there's also cost that ends up making a big difference too. So just making sure you guys find the right school for your fit is going to be super important. And Raegan, this kind of flows into my next question is, what advice do you have for pre-PT students on ways to kind of stand out in the application process?
Okay, yeah, this is a tough one because going into applications, you realize like how many students are actually applying, and it becomes very scary because you're like, what does make me stand out? Like how am I going to stand out from all of these thousands of people applying to the same program? So the advice that I was given was just to be very true to yourself and be very like honest with yourself. Like what helped me was to think about the question like what makes me unique? Like what experiences have I had or what characteristics that I possess that make me like a unique applicant or even like a unique person in general? And how could I spin that to show them like this will make me a good future physical therapist? So I've really like marinated on this question like alone for a while because especially on your personal statement, like well, how am I gonna like make this paper like stand out amongst all the other ones? So that's something that you really need to like think about, like start thinking about like a year in advance, like what qualities, what experiences do I possess? And I had a few different things, like for an example, like I had the opportunity to be a captain of a collegiate soccer team and I was able to like gain a lot of experiences by leading like very different groups of girls and like people and like working with coaches and that helped me because I was able to talk about a lot of those experiences or qualities that I gained from that experience, along with many other things that um, other experiences like personally that I had gained. So I think just not trying to be like that cliche applicant and trying to like say what you think they're going to want you to say will help you to stand out because a lot of people are like, oh, like I love PT because I got injured and they helped me be better and I want to be that. And that is true for a lot of people. That was obviously like that's how I got my start and like my interest in physical therapy, but they're looking for something deeper and like things that I guess just the word unique is what stands out to for me is what I was told. Just try to find those qualities that you had that might not be in the majority of people. So it's tough, but and it takes a lot of thought, but yeah, that's my best advice.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. And I think, like you said, a lot of people do find out about the field through their injury. And I think it's completely okay to share about that experience.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, it's also maybe like what about the process, like I guess, really changed your life. And you and I
Yeah.
kind of shared about how, yes, we both got hurt playing sports and we kind of got introduced to the field and that's how we got interested. But you can't just say that as your story. There's got to be some
Yeah.
sort of detail about like, I think for me, I talk a lot about ACLs on my page, and it's just like when you get hurt to that magnitude, your sport is gone. A lot of times you
Mhm.
lose your identity of like, oh, for you, like a soccer player, and for me, playing basketball, it's like you lose your identity for, I don't even know, like nine months to a year, and
Yeah.
possibly even longer if you have some complications. And it's like, I think that's the kind of stuff that they want to hear about. It's like, oh, I had to like really fight through with my physical therapist, and we had to, we were just grinding and trying to work through and
Mhm.
seeing the process. And I think that's what led me to the field, was like the fact that I like genuinely loved going to physical therapy, which is such a weird thing because
Mhm.
I had a good physical therapist, and thankfully I did, because I think about like if I had a bad physical therapist who like I really didn't enjoy and I had a terrible recovery, like I don't know if I would be in the field now, and my life would be
Yeah.
completely different. And I think that's what, for me, that would be my story that I would share for if I was applying to if I was applying to PT school right now.
Yeah.
And you kind of already answered it, but Raegan, do you have any like interview advice as well?
Interview advice, I would definitely say practice interviewing, like mock interviews. I mean, that's the only way that I was able to become more comfortable. I would say try not to memorize your answers or your questions because that they can tell when you're reading off a script or like it should be interview should be more of a conversation rather than you giving them a speech. So I would get random people like professors, mentors, like classmates or my friends to just put me through like little mock interviews with very random questions, like easy, hard, like, more difficult than some. And that really made me more comfortable answering on the spot because you really don't know. Like, you can look up like 100 questions that are mostly asked on interviews, which is what I did, but you really never know. I had very different interview questions and interview styles. So just becoming more comfortable answering questions about yourself on the spot is my biggest advice.
Or is there any questions that you can remember off the top of your head that sticks out to you?
Oh man, I try to suppress my interview experience, but I had one that was if you were a camp counselor and it gave me like three different scenarios of people and it basically said who would you give this certificate to? And that was just like out of left field. I was like, huh? Like I thought you were gonna ask like where my best qualities came from or So I mean like really random stuff like that. I had to like tie a shoe for one and like explain like weird stuff. So yeah, don't go in trying to like know exactly what they're going to ask. I mean, there obviously were some like, why are you interested in physical therapy? Like there definitely were some like that, but then there were some that were just like had nothing to do with physical therapy. So that's why I'd say definitely like get people to ask you like random questions about yourself, like some related to physical therapy, some not, like some about like past experiences. So just getting comfortable speaking to people.
Yeah, I think that's really funny. And just kind of as you're telling me those like seemingly ridiculously random questions that they ask you, I think part of it is because that's honestly kind of how physical therapy can be.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you think a patient's going to come in, like they progress really, really well, and they come in and it's like, uh-oh. And then you have to like critically think through the process.
Yeah.
And when you're a new grad and even as a student, it kind of really, really throws you off because as a student, you're kind of like, oh, it should look like this. And then, I'm going to do this today. And then as you like start to work more as a PT, you're kind of like, it's never like that, rarely like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have complicated patients that just like seemingly don't make any sense. And I'm guessing that's why they told you that, because they want to see you kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, in a sense, think on your feet,
Yeah.
which is one of the probably the biggest traits that a physical therapist needs to have, is to be able to think on their feet. And this is probably the heaviest question that I'm going to ask you, Raegan. And this is kind of where I guess hopefully I can offer some advice for you, considering I've been
Mm-hmm.
through it. But what are your major worries and concerns about PT school?
Yeah, there's a couple definitely. As I'm like kind of like looking in, I start January 11th, so I still have 2 months kind of to prepare to kind of relax before the craziness hits. But I think a lot of them are like similar to what the normal ones are. Like the workload is going to be a lot bigger than anything I've had. Like the time management will be tougher because obviously like the school and the studying. Um, the main concern I have is just I've how my program works. It starts in January, so I've had like a built-in like half gap year of not being in like academics at all. So just getting back into it and like kind of learning like my groove again of like studying and like learning how to take on a larger workload is kind of like scary to me because it's not like I forgot how to study, but I haven't done it in months. I haven't needed to study in months. So just getting back in the swing of things and kind of finding a schedule kind of gives me some, not anxiety, but just some worries. And so we'll see. But I think mostly it's just like the fear of the unknown. Like it's not anything I've done before. So I feel like I just won't know what to expect until I'm in it. And that kind of worries me because I'm a planner and I like to know what my schedule is going to be and like how it's going to be. And I've looked up, like I've researched and I've asked questions to people, but again, I feel like I just won't know like how to take it all until I'm like in it, like in classes and studying. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it sounds like, at least from what I've heard from you today, is that like you're honestly in a good place. You are very structured and you do manage your time really, really well, and you understand like when your body and your brain needs a break. And I think those are
Mm-hmm.
honestly three of the biggest things that you need in PT school. And those are three things that I personally didn't know very well. I'm literally the complete opposite of you. I like have never owned a planner in my life, which I'm sure probably gives you anxiety just hearing that on my end.
Wow.
So like I do use my phone to kind of write down my schedule and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And I have a scheduler, but like I'm you're more like my wife, where she's like, she'll write a checklist for everything and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And that's just not in my nature to do so, which is probably a bad thing, to be honest. And I don't know if I've shared this too much on my I probably shared on my social media before, but like for me, I undergrad, I was an economics major. So obviously for me, it was a transition to a completely different field. I was in the
Mm-hmm.
consulting field for 7 months and I hated my job. So I quit. And then when I went to PT school, it was literally a complete culture shock because like, it's just a volume of information that they throw at you. And I was good for the first exam. Like I did pretty well in the first exam. I was like, cool, I'm good. And then everything is just like a big wave that just keeps coming and coming and coming. And you think you can handle the first wave, and you just keep getting hit and hit and hit. At least that's how I felt. And I actually ended up being on probation for like a term or 2 terms, something like that. The passing score at my school at the time, which I've at least heard that they lowered it, was an 83. So it
Wow.
was, yeah, which is really high.
Uh-huh.
So it was tough because and also in one of my classes that I failed, I got an 81.75. I was like, come on, it's right there.
Yeah.
So it was
Oh.
very stressful for me just having to, like, honestly just learn how to study. And I think that was the hardest part for me, is like, how can I study? How do I just fit all this information in while not like overworking myself, and also finding time to, still play basketball and still go to the gym and, hang out with friends and things like that. And it was a really, really tough challenge for me my first year. And, I was really, really close to failing out. And not a lot of people know that, but that's the reality of my story and my journey, is that, like, and I think that's why I care so much about the field, because I was, again, and I don't know what decision I would have made had they decided to make me like repeat the year again. Like, I don't
Mhm.
know if I would have gone back, because like we talked about, like, finance is a big role. And if you
Mhm.
divide 90,000 by 3 per year, it's $30,000 a year. And I was like, that I would have wasted $30,000.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I would have done. But thankfully, through God's grace, I was able to continue on and move forward with my career and everything like that. But I think by far the biggest thing for me was just like learning how to adjust my time, manage my time, so that I can figure out what part of the day I need to study, what part of the day I can just
Mhm.
relax, watch TV, go to the gym, and it's like you said, you have to plan those things in. Otherwise, you're going to get consumed by the amount of material that's coming in.
Yeah.
And as silly as it may sound, it's like, okay, if you're a morning person, I'm going to go to the gym from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. That's going to be my gym time. Or maybe you like to go after a class to kind of, release yourself for the day or whatever it
Mhm.
is. Or maybe you just want to binge watch Netflix for an hour. Those are things that I think are super, super important for all PT students to kind of understand, is the fact that, like, you can't, like, yes, you are a student, and like maybe 80% of your time should be for studying.
Mhm.
But the other 20% is for like your own time, whether it's hanging out with friends, going to the gym, whatever extracurriculars you like to do, like, you have to make time for that. And I
Yeah.
think that was a struggle that I found between like my first year, my second year was so much more lax, and I just got into a much better groove. And, it seems like, again, you are kind of well ahead of me for where I was at.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like you're definitely in a good spot. Um, and Raegan, my kind of last couple of questions for you is like, what, I guess, like, you're going to PT school, like, what are your goals? Like, do you want to work in sports? Do you want to work in acute care? Like, have you thought about that yet?
Yeah, I've definitely thought about that. In undergrad, I shadowed and interned. I shadowed in inpatient and outpatient clinic, a couple outpatient clinics, and then my internship was with Baylor Athletics. I worked with like the football team, stuff like that. So that's where I kind of got to see like the sports med side of it. And I think I obviously am leaning towards sports medicine because I just have a big passion for it. That's kind of where like my passion for physical therapy started. But I've also been looking into like women's health, some like different fields like that are kind of different that I never really heard about until recently. So I'm kind of just ready to get started and kind of like dip my toes in and just kind of see like what I'm more drawn to. But as of now, I think I'm leaning towards sports medicine, but we'll see. I mean, everyone
Yeah.
says you never really know until you get into it and like start doing clinicals and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny because you hear stories about when you go to PT school, they try to make you diversify your clinicals. Like, you have to go
Mm-hmm.
do an inpatient, a sniff, and then, an outpatient. Usually that's like the three. And then if you have four, maybe you can double up on one of the ones that you have an interest in.
Yeah.
And they at least at my school, they're kind of telling you like, oh yeah, try not to make up your minds about where you want to go, because a lot of people will have their minds changed because based on
Mm-hmm.
their clinicals. And I went into school 100% like you. I was like, I'm doing outpatient. Absolutely nothing will change my
Mm-hmm.
mind. And then when I went through my clinicals, it's like, yep, this definitely confirms that I'm nothing is changing my mind. And it's again, for me personally, because acute care, sniff, and things like that are absolutely necessary. Those people
Mm-hmm.
definitely need physical therapy. But the way that you and I got hurt, it's how we relate to our patients. And I think
Yeah.
relating to your patients is super, super important. You're going to have more empathy for your patients, which I think goes a long way. You're going to understand them because obviously you've been hurt playing soccer. So you're going to be like, okay, yeah, I've been there before. I know what it's like to miss games and miss time from whatever injury that you're dealing with. And I think it goes a long way. It's just like, okay, cool. Like Raegan's been there before. She understands like my injury. She
Mm-hmm.
understands what I'm going through and what it's like to miss time. And I think it's things like that that go a long way for, you know, improving the quality of care that you're providing. Um, and
Definitely.
the final question, which is not, it's actually more of a reverse question for you, Raegan, is do you have any questions for me about kind of specifically the sports PT realm, which again, a lot of students are interested in, but they don't really know, I guess, like where to start. Maybe it's a question because I think a lot of
Yeah.
people, and I guess a quick backstory is like I went into school wanting to be a sports PT, and it's like, what does that even mean? And then even
Mm-hmm.
at my last job, when I worked at a more traditional PT place, I thought I called myself a quote unquote sports PT, and I got to where I'm at now, a healthy baller, and it's like no, like it's completely different than what
Yeah.
I guess traditional models are. But I guess like, do you have any questions for me that I can hopefully help answer?
Mhm. Well, just a question, like it's kind of broad, but like if I'm wanting to be a sports PT, like out of like when I graduate, like what is the pathway to doing like what you're doing? Like what are like the main steps really?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I will say a lot of people that it's a common question I get. I don't think there's one singular
Mhm.
path for anybody. You know, my
Yeah.
journey was very different. I worked at my I the first PT job I had was with my last rotation, which is not that uncommon. You know, they liked me, so they chose
Hmm.
to hire me, and I went to go work there. I was there for 6 months, and I didn't like it, so I transitioned to another traditional place for another year and a half. And then Teddy, who a lot of you guys might know, strength coach therapy, him and I started connecting on social media, and I transitioned one of my ACL girls to him for kind of that late stage of rehab. And I just kind of DM'd Teddy. I was like, "Can I come shadow you? You know, can I come see what your place is like?" And then you walk in, and you see this 40-yard turf field. You see the weight room with
Hmm.
like the squat racks and like the sleds and everything like that. And you're kind of like, "Whoa! Like this is a whole new
This
world
is
that I've never
PT.
been."
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've seen it before. Like you're an athlete, so it's like you're like
Mhm.
I'm guessing Baylor University. You guys have this like all this equipment and things like that you can use, but like a traditional place is not really going to have. Most traditional places don't have that. Like the heaviest, you know, I say this a lot, but the heaviest dumbbell my last PT place had that I worked at was 10 pounds. And it's like, you can't really get anyone stronger with that piece of
Yeah.
equipment. And we had zero open space. So, you know, I couldn't even do, you know, late stage cutting, and I couldn't even get people up to full speed sprinting, which is absolutely necessary for athletes. And then you walk in the door again, you see all the equipment, and then like for my last job, I'll be lucky if I had 4 to 5 patients total in the entire week out of 55 patients that I was seeing for the week, or 55 appointment slots. I'll be lucky if, you know, 7 to 8 of those 55 were athletes. And then I go in and shout out Teddy, I see 4 patients for the day, and it's literally just athlete, athlete, athlete. And it's like, can I come work here? Like
Yeah.
this is the dream, you know? And that's how I started. Like I every few weeks I would just after work I would drive to go shadow Teddy, and then eventually we kind of formulated that relationship. And I was like, you know, if you're ever looking to hire another physical therapist, I'd love to come work here. And I I asked Teddy this like after he hired me. I was like, why did you choose to hire me? I had no like people think that you need all these letters after your name, like a CSCS, and you got an
Hmm.
OCS and all that kind of stuff. And I had nothing. I literally just had my TPT degree and my license, and that's all I really had to my name. And for Teddy, he said that he took a chance on me because I showed initiative. You know, I was going in after work. He's like, I would work a full day from 8 to 5:30, and I would drive straight to Healthy Baller and go shadow him for 3 hours. So
Hmm.
he knew my days were 11, 12 hours long. And he was like, you don't have to do this. There's absolutely no reason for you to
Yeah.
come here, except for the
Yeah.
fact that he knew I wanted to learn. So that was my path to how I got the job at Healthy Baller, just
Right.
like showing initiative. And when I was there, I tried to, you know, engage with him and ask questions about why he was doing certain things. And, you know, I think that for him, that's what stood out about me. And I think that for people who want to work in this type of setting, I don't, maybe personal bias, I don't recommend owning a gym. There's a lot of stresses that comes with owning a gym, like the maintenance and all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. But again, there are PTs that I know who own the entire facility, and they
Mhm.
love it, but just from my personal experiences, starting a PT business is hard enough of trying to start it from the ground up and build your patient load and things like that. So I think joining with a strength and conditioning facility that has great strength coaches that kind of match up to your philosophies and the demographic that you
Mhm.
want to work with, then that's kind of a perfect fit. For you, like, let's say you really want to work with like soccer, basketball, and football. Like maybe those are your big things that you want to work for. Find a facility that trains those type of athletes, and then, hey, be like, hey, I'm
Yeah.
Raegan. I'm a physical therapist. I'd love to come work here. Or have you guys thought about starting physical therapy at your facility? Because a lot of places don't ever think about that. They opened as a strength and conditioning gym, right?
Yeah.
And that's how Teddy started physical therapy at Healthy Baller. He went to the owners and he's like, hey, can I set up a table in the back, and you work out some sort of deal, whatever it may be, to start physical therapy there, obviously making sure you're protected with all like the licensing and making sure um, you're protected insurance wise also at that facility. And
Mhm.
then once that's all cleared, like, just start seeing patients, and then
Yeah.
over time you just get busier and busier. And as long as you are providing the level of care that you feel like is best for your athletes, and you're getting them back, like, people will start coming in. People are like, oh wow, like Raegan's really good with knees or shoulders or whatever it is. And then like, oh wow, she helped me get back to the soccer field or get back on the basketball court really, really quickly. And she's great. And then word of mouth starts to formulate. And then you become known as like the sports PT in whichever area that you want to
Yeah.
settle in. I guess for you, it sounds like it's going to be Texas, since that's, your
Exactly.
hometown maybe. And I think that's where I would start, is just, I think the biggest thing is networking and formulating relationships wherever you feel like you want to settle in for being a sports PT. I would say it is very hard to start with it like immediately out of PT school.
Yeah. That's what it sounds like.
It's definitely challenging, just because it is a very niche market to work in, and you need somewhat experience unless you get lucky like me. But also, some secondary advice is that if you do end up wanting to work in this type of environment, I think having some sort of mentorship out of PT school is absolutely like massive. And for like when I got hired by Teddy, he would set aside an hour of his time every week, and we would just like go over stuff, concepts, case studies, and things like that. And then we hired Alyssa a little bit after, about a year after I started, and we did the same. Both and I did the same thing for her. And now we have Christine Sweezy, who we just
Mhm.
hired about a month and a half ago, and we do the same thing for her. You know, it's a tough environment to work in, and you have to have an environment where you're willing to ask, where you have a space to ask questions,
Yeah.
which I feel like I never really had at my previous two jobs. I was like, what time did I have? I was seeing 55, 60 patients a week. Like
Mhm.
anytime I had, I was trying to wolf down some food and finish my notes. That was
Yeah.
literally the downtime I had. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but that's where I would start as far as like getting into the sports rehab world. I definitely think it's possible. I just think that it's a world that some people aren't necessarily willing to work for.
Yeah.
So as long as you're willing to work in that environment and you're willing to put in the hours, because it is a lot of hours. There's subtle details of sports PT that people don't really know. Like if the definition of, also part of the definition of being a sports PT is that you're also willing to work pretty late hours, because you probably going to be working with high school students, right?
Mhm.
So if you're working with high school students, they don't get off of school until 3 o'clock, 3:30. That means they can't get to your facility until 4 o'clock. So if you want to have a fairly full caseload, like, you're going to be working until at the earliest 7 o'clock, and maybe even until
Yeah.
8 or 9 o'clock at night. So there's a lot of these kind of details that people don't really understand. Like, the average I get off of work is 7, and sometimes I don't get off until
Mhm.
8. And one time I took a patient at 8, so I didn't get home until like 9:30 p.m.
Yeah.
So it's a different lifestyle that, again, not everyone, it's not for everybody.
Mhm.
It's a grind, and if you're willing to do it, and it's a field that you are passionate about, which it seems like you are, like, it's 1,000% worth it to help athletes get back on the field again, get back on the court again. It's such a rewarding job to be a part of.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So yeah, I think that, it was a really cool episode to have you. You're the first kind of pre-PT student I've had, just to get a different perspective on things. I know I do have some pre-PT students that follow my my Instagram and kind of are interested in not only physical therapy, but maybe specifically kind of the sports PT realm that I work in right now. So I think it's also cool just to see, the worries and concerns that many students like yourself are going to experience before they go to PT school. And then when you get to PT school, you kind of just settle in on your groove, and you just keep your head down and keep running forward until you get to the finish line. And it'll fly by for you. It seems like 2 years is like, oh, I have another 2 years of schooling to go, but it'll go by really fast. And you're obviously still really young since you just graduated from undergrad, so you'll be a doctor when you're like 24, right? 23, 24. Yeah. So it's crazy, right? It goes by very fast. And maybe you and I will do a follow-up podcast like at the end of your PT journey or at the end of your PT school journey, and then we can kind of learn more about what you've been through.
That'd be awesome.
Cool. And Raegan, I know that you obviously have a pretty good social media following too. Do you mind kind of plugging in any information that so people can kind of follow along with your PT journey?
Oh yeah. I have 2 Instagrams. One is just at Raegan Padgett, and one's at Raegan Padgett _fit. And that's kind of where I post more like fitness stuff. And I'm hoping to eventually integrate more things I learned from my program. So hopefully that's where it's leading. Cool.
Awesome. And I will make sure I link all of Raegan's information and all of her social medias on her in the information below, so you guys can make sure you follow it. So I definitely appreciate you coming on, Raegan, and I wish you the best of luck in your PT journey. And I look forward to hopefully meeting you in person someday, and maybe we can do something like this again in the future.
Yes, awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Cool, awesome.
Thank you for watching today's video. Please feel free to like and subscribe and share it on your social media platforms. If you're interested, I have started an ACL Mastermind group, which is a growing library of content centered around ACL rehab. It has exercises ranging from immediate post-op to late-stage sport-specific movements and everything in between. It's a growing library and currently holds over 250 videos. There's content centered around assessments, movement breakdowns, exercise breakdowns, case studies, and a whole lot more. You also gain access to a private forum where you can engage with like-minded people, ask questions, share research articles, and share resources. If you're interested, please feel free to click the link below. Thank you for watching.